So this is my 15th year volunteering for the Rhinelander Area Food Pantry. When I started out, I was just a gardener. That's all I was interested in doing. But pretty quick into that process, they asked me if I would serve on the steering committee, in part because of the integral part the garden was playing in pantry operations. We produce 3,000 to 5,000 pounds of fresh organic produce for pantry customers every year. So when I got that promotion to steering committee, I decided I needed to learn more about the other aspects of the pantry. And so my idea was to volunteer in the wintertime when I had more time to do other jobs at the pantry. Now, I'm not going to say I've done every job at the pantry, but I've done a lot of them. I worked during distribution when the clients come in to get their food. I did stocking of the shelves. I gleaned the produce that we get from grocery stores, the fuzzy strawberries we'd pick out and we'd clean it up, and then we'd have the good strawberries to send out to the clients. And yes, I emptied the garbage and I cleaned up the bathroom after the toilet backed up. So I've done quite a bit. In the course of doing all that volunteer work at the pantry, I gathered some stories, and I've selected 3 that I'm going to share with you today. It was really, really difficult for me to choose because there were so many neat stories to share. So the first story is about a home delivery I did. I'm at the pantry late in the day. I'm putting my produce on the shelves, getting ready for distribution. And Jane, our pantry manager, asked me if I have time for an emergency home delivery. I haven't done a delivery yet, and so that's another box I can check on my list. And so I say, Jane, absolutely, I'd be glad to do it. So I grab a box of dry goods off the shelves that we have there specifically for this purpose. I add some milk, some cheese, some meat, things from the cooler that couldn't be in the dry goods box. And then I see my produce. And I think, well, let's throw in some tomatoes, some onions, some carrots, some fresh basil. So I load the box of groceries with my vegetables up into my car, and I head out to the address that Jane had given me. Jane had explained that a woman had been discharged from the hospital and was homebound with no food in the home. So I went to this apartment complex. It was not one of the stellar complexes in Rhinelander. It was a bit ragged. I went in, and frankly, the hallway was filthy. It took me some time to find the apartment. I had to wander around. There weren't very good directions. Finally found it. Knock, knock on the door. No answer. Knock, 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 a little louder. And pretty soon I hear a faint voice from inside say, come in. So I go in, and there's a woman, an older lady, in a wheelchair, in a completely empty apartment. Not a stick of furniture in it. And so I start putting the groceries away, and she tells me a bit of her story. She had been sick for almost a year and had spent the last month in the hospital. When she was sick, she had sold most of her furniture in order to pay medical bills. And then while she was in the hospital, she was evicted from her home, and she lost the rest of her furniture. I think she was a little self-conscious about being in this apartment with no furniture. And she did explain to me that her daughter was out trying to round up some furniture for her, and hopefully they would come later that day. So as I'm putting out the groceries and putting them away for her, she sees the vegetables, and she says, oh, those look good. And I say, well, we grow them in our garden on Thayer Street. She goes, oh, I've seen that garden. It's absolutely beautiful. I used to love gardening. And she says to me, will you bring me one of those tomatoes? And so she grabs the tomato from me. She cups it in her hands like this, and she smells the stem end. And she says, there's nothing like a homegrown fresh tomato. And so I sat down. I didn't want to leave her there alone. I sat down and we proceeded to talk gardening for over an hour, back and forth. Now, she was from a different culture, and she was also, had a lot of wisdom about gardening that she did share during that conversation. And then finally, her daughter arrived with her grandchildren, and the boys, big strapping boys, hauled in some furniture, and I was really glad to see that she was going to be taken care of. And so I was able to leave with a good heart. And that experience, that exchange of gardening information that we did that day, that's something I've used in my gardening the whole time. You see, I thought I was an expert in gardening, but to learn from somebody with that much wisdom was really something that improved me as a human being and a person. So the next story I'm going to share is about the volunteers that I've worked with over the years. And like the other stories, it was difficult to narrow it down to one. But I do have one person that I'd like to talk about. But before I talk about that individual person, I'd like to talk about the youth that come to the garden. They're usually on a mission trip and come to help out, and we get some serious work done. Major garden renovations, they do build raised beds, and some years they literally saved our harvest from runaway weeds. Really nice. I met kids from all over the world, from South Africa, Australia, France, Greece, and it's really just a great experience. I have both high school groups, college kids. It's great fun. It's a lot of work, but it's really rewarding. And with the littler kids, it's often just an educational experience. So there's this little kid from Chicago, bright flaming red hair, and he's there at the garden. And I reach down and I pull a carrot out of the ground. And he was from Chicago. Probably never saw how a carrot grow. I thought the eyes were going to pop right out of his head. He was so amazed. And you know what we did when we do this is we usually wash up the carrots and then we eat them. So it's great fun to have the little kids there. So now on to my story that I originally started to share about the individual that I worked with. He was a court-ordered community service person, and they usually get funneled my way because I'm willing to deal with one, the paperwork that's involved, and two, the supervision that's required for that. And so this young man, John, has 200 hours of community service. Now that's pretty significant. And I'm not going to fool you. Some of the people that come from this program don't work out so well, and other people a little better. And one thing I've learned about volunteering with people at the garden is you got to drop your judgments and take people as they are and just accept what they are. And so John was on this end of the scale, and then there were some other that were not so much. But John already knew how to garden, so I didn't have to provide him any direction. He went right to work, worked his time. He was never absent, never missed a day, which I got to tell you is really unusual for community service volunteers. He was also mechanically inclined, which I'm not. Almost immediately, he fixed my gate, which was about to fall off its hinges. He tightened the hinges on the shed. He sharpened all my tools. He took them home and sharpened them. Most of this he did all in his own initiative. Then one day I happened to be talking to another gardener, and I mentioned that we could use some cold frames. Well, the very next time John comes, he has a set of plans for constructing cold frames. He has an itemized list of materials with the cost, and he says, if you can find the funds, I'll build the cold frames. Absolutely, I say, John, you got a deal. So John's time came to an end, and it was a sad day for us at the garden because we enjoyed so much working with him. And I filled out his paperwork and we said our goodbyes, except one problem. The very next day, there's John at the gate waiting for me to let him in. He continued to garden with us for another 2 years. Despite having a growing family and a demanding job, he still gave back to his community. And in some respects, he made me feel like a slacker. So the last story I'm going to share with you today is about a particularly inspiring day during distribution. During distribution, I usually load groceries into cars because I have a good, strong back and I'm able to do it. Happy to do it. So the way it works is the client comes out with their grocery cart, they hand me their paperwork, and then I load the groceries. This middle-aged man comes out. He's dressed in work clothes, has a badge on his shirt that shows that he does physical labor for work. And he hands me his paperwork, and I look behind him, and there's 3 huge carts full of groceries. I've never seen that many groceries before. There were so many. So I took a glance at his paperwork. 2 adults, 9 children in the family. And so I can understand, why he's at the pantry with 9 kids to feed. And again, I had to lower my judgment and take people as they are. And so I start to load his groceries into the car. Or it's actually a big passenger van, of course, with 9 kids. And up pops this head from the back seat. This little adorable girl, maybe 7 years old, says, "Would you like to hear me sing a song?" And the dad goes, "Oh no, Sherry, not right now." And I say something like, "Well, let her sing. I don't mind. I've got groceries to stock." And so he says, "Okay, you asked for it." And pretty soon, all the other kids that are in the car pile out and go into the pantry with the dad, ostensibly to do some paperwork and to go to the bathroom. Obviously, they've heard the performance before. And this little girl whips out a ukulele. And she says, "I just learned how to play." And I'm thinking to myself, oh my, maybe I made a mistake. I was thinking of Tiny Tim and Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Maybe I should have said, "No thanks, Sherry." Anyway, she starts to sing. And her voice is so beautiful. And the only way to describe it is angelic. It's as good or better than anything you've heard on any of those TV talent shows. Pretty soon, people are coming out of the pantry to listen to her sing, clients and volunteers. And there's about a dozen people around the van, and she has the door open and she's singing with her ukulele. It was an old-time gospel tune, and I wished I could remember it, but I can't. Better yet, I wished I would have taken out my phone and taken a video, because it was so beautiful. And the whole time, tears were coming down my face. I was so proud to be able to help her and her family have healthy meals. And it was just one of those experiences that has sustained me as a volunteer for many, many months and years. So hopefully, I've inspired some of you to do some volunteer work. I'd encourage you to find something you're passionate about. I was lucky. I love gardening. It was no problem. It's my hobby, so it matched up perfectly. But find something that you're passionate about. And you don't have to make a huge commitment. You could do just a few hours. When I was working, I used to just stop at a nursing home, probably can't do that now, and just sit and talk to somebody and maybe take them out for a walk. But find some way to connect with other people. It will be much more rewarding for you. And at least in my case, I really enjoyed the work, and I feel like I've made our community more resilient by doing this. And I also, all those stories that I shared, I hope exemplify the fact that I received way more than I ever gave in doing this work. Thank you very much.